Africa is the second largest continent in the world in both area and population. It is an isolated landmass with only a small land bridge in the northeast, connecting the African mainland with Western Asia. 48 countries share the area of mainland Africa, plus 6 island nations are considered to be a part of the continent. All in all, there are 54 sovereign African countries and 2 disputed areas, Somaliland and Western Sahara. An estimated 1.37 billion live in the second largest continent, representing about 14% of the world's population. The African continent covers 6% of Earth's total surface area and 20% of its land area. Good day, loves. My name is Sonia, and you are welcome to another episode of Uncovered Truth. If you are new here, I post true crime and mystery cases here weekly, so if that's your sort of thing, please consider subscribing to Uncovered Truth for more videos. Thank you. Africa's history is lengthy, intricate, and frequently ignored by the world's historians. So in today's video, we will be reviewing and discussing the 10 most dangerous countries in Africa. In comparison to other continents, Africa has the youngest population. Africa is the second least rich continent overall, behind Oceania, in terms of wealth and per capita wealth. Scholars have linked this to a variety of causes, such as climate, the Cold War, lack of democracy, and corruption. Europe conquered all of Africa between the late 19th and the early 20th centuries, leaving only Ethiopia and Liberia as sovereign states. After World War II, Africa underwent a process of decolonization that produced the majority of its current states. So, starting from the bottom, the 9th most dangerous country in Africa is Burkina Faso. The ranking is based on current economic, political, and government conditions, as well as crime figures. Burkina Faso is a landlocked country in West Africa, bounded to the northwest by Mali, to the northeast by Niger, to the southeast by Benin, and to the south by Togo and Ghana. It's home to 20 million people. Formerly known as the Republic of Upper Volta, it was renamed Burkina Faso by President Thomas Sankara. Burkinabe is the name given to its inhabitants, and Ouagadougou is the nation's capital and largest city. In 1896, it was colonized by the French as a part of French West Africa. Due to French colonialism, the country's official language of government and business is French. There are 60 indigenous languages officially recognized by the Burkinabe government. Burkina Faso has been severely affected by the rise of Islamist terror in the Sahel since the mid-2010s. Various coups have also taken place in the country, with a recent one happening in September 2022. The military proclaimed itself to be in control on January 24, 2022, along with the Patriotic Movement for Safeguard and Restoration. The military had previously carried out a coup against President Kabore. The military junta reinstated the constitution on January 31st and named Paul Henry Sandaogo as interim leader. He served in that capacity until he was deposed on 30th September in a second coup and was succeeded by military commander Ibrahim. Terrorism, banditry, and kidnapping are all common in Burkina Faso's border regions, especially along the country's borders. As attacks and atrocities by armed Islamist groups increase, unauthorized killings by state security forces and pro-government militias during counter-terrorism operations persisted, and the humanitarian situation deteriorated in 2021. There was a noticeable decline in Burkina Faso's human rights and security situation. So for Burkina Faso, these are the reasons why it is deemed to be a dangerous country in Africa. Moving on to the next, we have South Sudan as the 8th most dangerous country in Africa. South Sudan, also known as the Republic of South Sudan, is a landlocked nation in East Africa. Ethiopia, Sudan, the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, and Kenya are its neighbors. In 2019, 12 million people were predicted to live there. The capital and biggest city is Juba. It gained independence from Sudan on 9th July 2011, making it the most recent sovereign state or country with widespread recognition as of 2022. Until Sudan's independence in 1956, Sudan was ruled as an Anglo-Egyptian condominium while it was occupied by Egypt during the Muhammad Ali dynasty. The Southern Sudan Autonomous Region was established in 1972 and existed until 1983 during the First Sudanese Civil War. Soon after the Comprehensive Peace Agreement was signed in 2005, a second civil war in Sudan erupted. When the autonomous government of Southern Sudan was established later that year, Southern autonomy was reinstated. Following a referendum in January 2011, with 98.83% in favor of independence, South Sudan gained its independence on July 9, 2011. South Sudan has suffered ethnic violence and endured a civil war characterized by rampant human rights abuses, including various ethnic massacres and killings of journalists by various parties to the conflicts from December 2013 until February 2020. 8 years after obtaining independence, South Sudan should be a hopeful nation. Instead, a severe humanitarian crisis is gripping the region. Massive displacement, raging violence, and severe food shortages have resulted from political conflict that has been amplified by economic difficulties and droughts. More than 7 million people, or roughly 2/3 of the population, require assistance, including 6.9 million people who are hungry. Famine was proclaimed in 2 South Sudanese countries in 2017, and it has continued to be a serious concern ever since. This year is likely to see another famine if there isn't peace and reliable access for aid organizations. Next on our list is Mali. This West African country is the 8th largest country in Africa. Its capital and largest city is Bamako, and its official language is French. Mali was originally part of 3 immensely powerful and wealthy West African dynasties that controlled the trans-Saharan trade: the Ghana Empire, the Mali Empire, and the Songhai Empire. The Mali Empire was the wealthiest country in Africa at its peak in 1300, occupying an area about twice the size of modern-day France and stretching all the way to the continent's west coast. Mali was also one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and its emperor at that time, Mansa Musa, is said to be the wealthiest person in history. Mining and agriculture are the foundations of the national economy. Gold and salt are 2 valuable resources. In truth, Mali is still the continent's 3rd largest gold producer. Since January of 2012, Mali has been wrecked by armed violence. Mali announced on January 10th that it would close its borders and recall several ECOWAS ambassadors in response to sanctions imposed on the country for delaying election for 4 years. France's ambassador was expelled on February 4th. According to Human Rights Watch, in March 2022, Malian military and alleged Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group murdered over 300 civilian persons in central Mali. In February 2022, France withdrew its troops from Mali. On May 2nd, the The military administration announced that it will violate the defense treaty signed with France in 2013, further deteriorating Malian-French relations. French authorities have condemned the latest announcement, calling it illegitimate. A UN panel revealed that 543 civilians were murdered and 269 were injured in the first 3 months of 2022, threatening the 2015 peace accord between the government and pro-independence factions for the first time in 5 years. In addition, the report indicated a significant increase in number of people in need for humanitarian aid over the previous year. So for Mali, these are some of the reasons why it is tagged as a dangerous country in Africa. The 6th most dangerous country in Africa we are going to talk about is Ethiopia. The Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia is also known as the Horn of Africa, with about 113 million citizens. It ranks the 12th most populous nation in the world and the 2nd most populous in Africa after Nigeria. The national capital and largest city in the country is Addis Ababa. With more than 80 different ethnic groups, Ethiopia is a multi-ethnic nation. In the nation, Christianity is the most widely practiced religion, with a considerable amount of people being Muslims and a negligible percentage of practitioners to traditional religion. Ethiopia is seen as an emerging power and a developing country with the greatest economic development in sub-Saharan Africa due to foreign direct investment in agricultural and manufacturing expansion. However, the country is recognized as poor in terms of per capita income and the Human Development Index, with high rates of poverty, poor respect for human rights, and a literacy rate of only 49%. Human rights breaches are frequently associated with ethnic and communal conflict in the country. During a peaceful protest in the Oromia and Amara areas in 2016, 100 non-violent protesters were killed by direct government gunfire. The government frequently disregards citizens' privacy rights and rules governing search warrants. The government restricts freedom of assembly, notably for opposition members, and security personnel have used lethal force to disperse protests. Violence and discrimination against women remain issues in the country. Female genital mutilation is common, while efforts to stop it have had some success. Child economic and sexual exploitation as well as human trafficking persist. Forced labor, particularly among youngsters, is an ongoing issue. Low-level government meddling in labor unions continues. Although the government usually maintained religious freedom, local authorities occasionally interfere with religious practice. The incidence of conflict has increased, particularly in the north since November 2020, having substantial impact on lives, livelihoods, and infrastructure. Food insecurity is growing due to adverse weather events, locust invasion, conflict, and global conditions, leading to a high inflation of food prices. Presently, majority of the regions in Ethiopia are all no-go zones due to conflict and civil unrest. The next most dangerous country in Africa on my list is Libya. The 4th biggest country in Africa is Libya. The Islamic country is also the 16th biggest on the planet by land. Libya is blessed with the 10th biggest proven oil reserves on earth as well. Its capital and largest city is Tripoli. Sadly for Libya, the nation has not known real peace since the Libyan civil war erupted. A second civil war began between the two rival governments in Tripoli, backed by the West and the Tobruk in the East. It has been made more savage by the participation of numerous Islamic and tribal militias. The talks to end the civil war continue to this day. The nation gained its independence from Italy back in 1951. At this point, Muammar Gaddafi overthrew the king in a bloodless coup. He presided over the Libyan Cultural Revolution during the year 1973 up to the point he died in a Libyan civil war in the year 2011. The Arab Spring uprisings of 2011 sparked the current humanitarian crisis and political military instability in Libya, which resulted in a civil war. These events are collectively referred to as the Libyan crisis. The legacy of the civil war and the growth of the armed organizations caused bloodshed and instability throughout the nation, which in turn sparked a new civil war in 2014. Since the violence began in early 2011, the situation in Libya has caused tens of thousands of deaths. Despite possessing the greatest oil reserves of any African nation, Libya's economically vital oil industry suffered during both civil wars, with most facilities being destroyed or blockaded by rival factions. The LNA and the GNA were represented by the 5+5 Joint Libyan Military Commission, which on October 23, 2020, declared a permanent ceasefire agreement in all areas of Libya. The deal went into effect once and was stipulated that all foreign fighters must depart Libya within 3 months, with a joint police force tasked regarding the continuous areas. That day saw the launch of the first commercial flight connecting Tripoli to Benghazi. An interim unity government was established on March 10, 2021, with plans to function until the 10th of December. The election has, however, been postponed numerous times, thus keeping the unity in the government's power indefinitely and igniting tensions that could restart another war. The fourth country on the list is Sudan, a country in Northeast Africa. As of 2022, its population is 46 million and it has a total land area of 1 million square kilometers, making it the third largest in the Arab League and the third largest in Africa by land area. Its capital is Khartoum and its largest city is Omdurman, part of the metropolitan area of Khartoum. From the early 19th century, the entirety of Sudan was conquered by Egypt under the Muhammad Ali dynasty. It was under Egyptian rule that Sudan acquired its modern borders and began the process of political, agricultural, and economic development. After Sudan became independent, the Jafar regime began Islamist rule. Between 1989 and 2019, Sudan was ruled by a 30-year-long military dictatorship led by Omar al-Bashir, who was accused of human rights violations such as torture, persecution of minorities, sponsorship of global terrorism, and ethnic genocide as a result of his actions in the Darfur region, which erupted in 2003. The regime's acts murdered between 300,000 and 400,000 individuals. Protests demanding Bashir's resignation erupted in 2018, resulting in a coup on 11th April 2019 and Bashir's imprisonment. However, Sudan's Blue Nile state has seen repeated deadly unrest since July 2022. Clashes between the African Hausa ethnic group and rival tribes between July and early October left at least 149 people dead and hundreds wounded and displaced an estimated 65,000 people, according to the UN. Tribal conflicts are on the rise in Sudan because of the security vacuum created by the October push in Khartoum, experts say. Flooding and attacks by militias destroyed more than 600 schools during August and September, according to the Education Ministry. Schools are often just shells of buildings lacking furniture, running water, or toilets. The collision of cultures, religions, and ethnicities in Sudan, including those of sub-Saharan Africa and those of Arab Islamic world, have led to nearly 50 years of civil war. So these are the reasons why Sudan is also considered a dangerous country in Africa. Next, we have the Central African Republic. The country's current borders were established by France, which ruled the country as a colony starting in the late 19th century. After gaining independence from France in 1960, the Central African Republic was ruled by a series of autocratic leaders, including an abortive attempt at a monarchy. Despite significant mineral deposits and other resources such as uranium reserves, crude oil, gold, diamond, cobalt, lumber, and hydropower, as well as significant amounts of arable land, the Central African Republic is one of the world's 10 poorest countries with the lowest GDP per capita at purchasing power parity in 2017. According to the Human Development Index, that's the HDI, as of 2019, the country had the second lowest level of human development, just ahead of Niger, ranking 188 out of 189 countries. The country ranked 150th out of 150 in terms of inequality adjusted human development index. The Central African Republic is also regarded as the unhealthiest and most dangerous country for young people. As of 2022, the Central African Republic is a scene of a civil war ongoing since 2012. The situation in Central African Republic remains a cause for international concern, with violence from resurgent armed groups and ongoing instability at all levels. Speakers told the Secretary Council as it addressed the mandates of the mission there. According to the Human Development Index, the Central African Republic is one of the most dangerous places in Africa. Things like aggravated assaults, robberies, and murders are quite common. It is also known that armed groups who control some parts of the country target civilians for kidnapping. Closing of land and air borders is frequent, which means that tourists can be left stranded without a chance to leave the country. Now, for Central African Republic, these are the reasons why it's tagged as a dangerous country. Last but not the least on the list is the Democratic Republic of Congo, also known as Zaire, and informally Congo Kinshasa. By area, it is the second largest country in Africa and the 11th largest in the world, with a population of around 108 million. The Democratic Republic of Congo is the most populous, officially francophone country in the world. The national capital and the largest city in the country is Kinshasa. Congo gained independence from Belgium on June 30th, 1960, and was immediately met by a series of separatist movements, culminating in Mobutu's assumption of power in the 1965 coup. Mobutu renamed the country Zaire in 1971 and imposed a repressive dictatorship until the First Congo War overthrew him in 1997. The country was subsequently renamed and faced the Second Congo War, which lasted from 1998 to 2003 and claimed the lives of 5.4 million people. President Joseph Kabila, who ruled the country from 2001 to 2019, brought the conflict to an end, but human rights in the country remained poor, with frequent violations such as forced disappearances, torture, arbitrary detention, and restriction on civil liberties. Following the 2018 general election, Kabila was succeeded as president by Felix, who has governed since. Kivu in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo has been the site of continuous military war since 2015. The human rights situation across the DRC remains dire, with internal conflicts and poor governance contributing to a severe food crisis and the internal displacement of nearly 5.5 million people, more than anywhere else in Africa. Over 100 armed groups are active in Eastern Congo, and the imposition of martial law has facilitated abuses by government security forces. Armed groups are often abusive security forces that carry out massacres, abductions, rape, and sexual violence, recruitment of children, and other attacks on civilians with near total impunity. The rights to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and the media are frequently under attack. President Felix's administration has yet to demonstrate that it can bring about systematic reforms and human rights improvements ahead of the 2023 elections. So, there's the Democratic Republic of Congo and there's Congo. So there are two different countries close to each other, but they are separate. And this is the Democratic Republic of Congo that is on a list of the most dangerous countries to ever visit, or the most dangerous countries in Africa. To top our list of most dangerous country in all of Africa is Somalia. Officially, the Federal Republic of Somalia is a country in the Horn of Africa. Somalia was likely one of the first lands to be settled by early humans due to its location. Somalia and its 50 million inhabitants have been called the most homogeneous country culturally on the continent. Approximately 85% of its citizens claim to be ethnically Somali. A few minorities mostly live in the south of Somalia. The two national languages of Somalia prove to be Somali and Arabic. The majority of the population adheres to the Islamic faith as Sunnis. Somalia is a country known for its widespread poverty, civil wars, and territorial conflict, and unstable governments. However, like every other country in the world, Somalia also has its own share of exciting destinations, unique cultures, and fascinating geographical facts. Somalia was not always a scary place. The Supreme Revolutionary Council led Somali Democratic Republic in the late 1960s. However, the Somali Civil War in the 1980s broke the peace and forced the majority of towns to return to traditional laws. Today, Somalia is dealing with persistent armed conflicts, humanitarian crisis, and a lack of official protection. In 1969, the Supreme Revolutionary Council grabbed power to set up the Somali Democratic Republic. This fell around 22 years after the fact in year 1991. The Somali Civil War destroyed it. This war was caused by the majority of its regions going back to being religious and then applying the traditional law. By the onset of the new millennium, many federal administrations became established. The insurgents suffered the loss of the majority of their territory. By 2012 mid-year, an attempt to set up democracy ensued. August of 2012 saw the passage of a provisional constitution. The federal government of Somalia arose that same month and year. Mogadishu, the capital, then became rebuilt over 2 decades of fighting. Somalia's economy today is highly informal. It relies heavily on livestock, telecommunications, and overseas Somalis remitting money back to their families. Somalia is facing a humanitarian crisis of major severity and magnitude in 2022, following 4 failed rainy seasons and ongoing protracted conflicts, and the impacts of rising global food prices. The latter made significantly worse by the war in Ukraine and the disruption to global food and fuel markets resulting from the war. It's quite sad that all these nations mentioned as the most dangerous places to be in Africa sit at the very bottom of the GPI index rankings when compared to all of the other countries in the world. Drought has left nearly 8 million people across Somalia in urgent need of humanitarian food assistance. Populations in 2 districts of Somalia's Bay region are projected to face famine between October and December if an urgent increase in assistance does not reach individuals most in need. You can help with donations. So for all the countries I mentioned earlier, if you'd like to donate or help them, I'll leave the link to the website for donation in the description below. If you've stayed and watched up to this part, I'd like to say a very big thank you. For those of you who haven't subscribed, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave your suggestions in the comment section down below. Until then, have a nice day and stay safe.